You're watching the Everything Network. In the mid-1970s, federal investigators in Santa Clara County began reviewing a series of routine surveillance tapes tied to a suspected gambling ring. What they uncovered pointed to something larger and older, a structured criminal network operating quietly and around San Jose. The discovery led agents to reopen files dating back more than 3 decades, to the years when a Sicilian grocer named Onofrio Sciortino was first identified as the local organizer of a small but disciplined outfit. Sciortino was born in San Giuseppe Giotto, Sicily, and immigrated to the United States in the 1920s, settling in San Jose. By the late 1930s, he owned a neighborhood grocery store that doubled as a meeting place for Italian immigrants. Investigators later determined that by about 1940, the store also functioned as an informal center for bookmaking and the settlement of private disputes. During World War II, rationing and black market demand allowed Sciortino to expand his activities. He maintained contacts with produce distributors and trucking firms, using those relationships to move both legitimate goods and gambling receipts. Law enforcement reports from the period describe him as a respected merchant with suspected ties to illegal wagering. Nothing connected him to violence or narcotics. His strength was organization and trust within the Italian-American community. By the late 1940s, San Jose had grown into a prosperous agricultural hub. Sciortino capitalized on the lack of large-scale criminal competition in the area. He relied on a small inner circle of relatives and close associates who managed betting operations and small loan collections. Each man operated his own legitimate front business, bars, restaurants, and hauling companies, making the network difficult to trace. Federal sources later concluded that Sciortino effectively created the San Jose crime family, independent but cooperative with the more powerful San Francisco and Los Angeles crime families. His organization remained small, estimated at no more than 30 made members and associates, but efficient. Unlike families in Chicago or New York, it avoided open conflict and public corruption scandals. By 1955, Sciortino's health had begun to decline. Among the younger men in his circle was Joseph Cerrito, another Sicilian immigrant who had arrived in California during the 1920s. Cerrito operated a Buick dealership on the Alameda and had a reputation for caution and business skill. Federal memos from the time describe him as an individual of interest in Sciortino's affairs. When Sciortino died in 1959, control passed smoothly to Cerrito. Newspapers identified the deceased as a respected grocer. No public reference was made to organized crime. Internally, however, law enforcement agencies recognized Cerrito as the new boss. Under him, the San Jose organization entered its most active period. In 1957, 2 years before Sciortino's death, the American public received its first clear evidence of a nationwide mafia structure. State troopers in Appalachian, New York, disrupted a gathering of more than 50 known mob figures. Among those detained was Joseph Cerrito of San Jose, California. His presence confirmed federal suspicions that the mafia's influence extended throughout the West Coast. Cerrito denied involvement, stating he had been in New York on legitimate business. He was released without charges, but the incident placed the San Jose group on the FBI's permanent radar. From that point forward, the Bureau categorized it as a distinct organized crime family operating under Cerrito's direction. During the 1960s, the San Jose family maintained close ties with Los Angeles and San Francisco while cultivating its own interests. Investigators linked the group to illegal bookmaking, loan sharking, and labor union manipulation, particularly in trucking and construction. The organization's strength lay in its ability to merge legitimate enterprises with under-the-table enforcement. Cerrito preferred low visibility. He avoided the ostentatious behavior that attracted federal attention elsewhere and kept his membership limited. FBI surveillance noted regular meetings at restaurants and automotive businesses, but produced little direct evidence of criminal transactions. A 1968 memorandum described the family as a small but cohesive unit that manages to remain virtually immune from successful prosecution. Local police departments, lacking federal resources, rarely pursued long-term investigations. The FBI maintained periodic surveillance and telephone monitoring, but without recorded admissions or cooperating witnesses, the cases rarely advanced. Agents repeatedly referred to the organization as one of the most elusive in the Western region. By the early 1970s, Cerrito's age and health began to limit his activity. Younger associates, such as Angelo Marino, a businessman in the dairy and cheese distribution industry, were already expanding the family's reach into legitimate commerce. Under Marino, the lines between legal business and organized crime would blur further, setting the stage for the later federal cases that finally brought the San Jose family into the open. After Joseph Cerrito's health began to fail in the early 1970s, the day-to-day management of the San Jose organization gradually shifted to his trusted lieutenants. Among them was Angelo Marino, a second-generation Sicilian-American whose public identity was that of a prosperous businessman. Marino owned and operated the California Cheese Company, one of the largest producers and distributors of Italian dairy products in Northern California. To outsiders, he was a self-made success. To investigators, he represented the new face of organized crime in the region, corporate, professional, and outwardly legitimate. By 1975, Marino had become the acknowledged boss. Cerrito died in 1978, leaving behind an organization that was smaller than most American crime families, but tightly controlled and financially stable. Under Marino, gambling and loan sharking continued, but the family's attention turned increasingly to labor influence, extortion, and the use of legitimate industry to launder proceeds. The California Cheese Company gave the appearance of stability while also serving, according to federal prosecutors, as a convenient vehicle for concealing racketeering profits. Law enforcement at the time struggled to prove the extent of Marino's criminal authority. The San Jose FBI office maintained surveillance and collected intelligence from informants within labor circles, but direct evidence was scarce. The family's operations rarely produced overt violence, and witnesses were unwilling to testify. Agents often referred to the Marino group as white-collar mafia, a network that moved money through contracts and shipping manifests rather than gunmen in alleys. By the end of the 1970s, the national climate had shifted. Federal agencies, using the RICO Act, were finally equipped to prosecute entire criminal enterprises rather than single offenses. In California, task forces began focusing on the intersection of organized crime and legitimate business. When investigators traced a series of extortion complaints and fraudulent shipping invoices back to Marino's company, they uncovered evidence of labor payoffs and intimidation. It was enough to open the first significant racketeering case ever brought against a member of the San Jose family. In 1977, a violent incident drew unprecedented attention. According to court filings, a trucking company employee named Peter Telly became involved in a dispute with Marino's son, Salvatore Marino, over union representation and money. Catelli was shot and killed, and his body was later discovered near Gilroy. The elder Marino, his son, and several associates were indicted for murder and conspiracy. The case marked the first time that a recognized San Jose boss faced direct prosecution for homicide. The trial revealed both the reach and the vulnerability of the organization. Prosecutors portrayed the California Cheese Company as a front through which the Marinos exercised control over labor unions and transport routes. Witnesses described threats and kickbacks. FBI agents detailed years of surveillance. Despite the evidence, legal technicalities and conflicting testimony complicated the proceedings. Angelo Marino was convicted of second-degree murder and conspiracy in 1980, but the verdict was later overturned on appeal due to procedural errors. He was retried, convicted again on lesser charges, and eventually sentenced to 10 years in state prison. His son received a lighter sentence. The convictions weakened the family's operational base and ended its long record of insulation from the courts. While Marino served time, remaining members attempted to maintain business through legitimate fronts. Bookmaking and loan collection persisted on a reduced scale, and occasional extortion complaints surfaced, but without centralized leadership, the network began to fragment. The Los Angeles and San Francisco families absorbed some of the activity once controlled from San Jose. By the time Marino was released in the mid-1980s, the region's criminal landscape had changed. The technology boom was underway. New money and new demographics left little room for the traditional rackets that had sustained earlier generations. Federal attention continued nonetheless. The FBI's Organized Crime Division kept Marino and his associates under observation, noting contacts with reputed figures in Southern California and Las Vegas. Informants suggested that the family retained a skeleton structure: an acting boss, a few capos, and a small circle of bookmakers, but its influence had diminished. Marino himself claimed to be retired from illegal activity and focused solely on his cheese business. He died in 1983, reportedly of natural causes, leaving leadership uncertain. After Marino's death, Emmanuel J. Figlia, a longtime associate, was believed to have assumed nominal control. Figlia was older, cautious, and uninterested in expansion. Under his guidance, the group maintained a few residual gambling operations and debt collection ventures, but it no longer functioned as a full-scale organized crime family. Law enforcement noted occasional cooperation between San Jose remnants and Los Angeles factions, particularly in sports betting, yet the arrangement resembled a business partnership rather than a hierarchical family. By the 1990s, the San Jose organization had effectively faded from national reports. Periodic investigations into money laundering and insurance fraud mentioned individuals with past ties to the family, but no major indictments followed. The FBI eventually reclassified the group as inactive. Unlike larger families that collapsed through high-profile trials, San Jose's decline occurred quietly through attrition and assimilation. The end of the 20th century brought broader changes to organized crime in California. Asian and Latino groups dominated gambling and narcotics markets, while white-collar crime shifted to technology and finance. The traditional Italian-American structure that Onofrio Sciortino built nearly half a century earlier no longer had a niche. Many of its former members had died, retired, or blended into legitimate enterprises. By the early 2000s, when reporters revisited the subject, local authorities described the San Jose family as a historical artifact. There were still occasional rumors, old names appearing in gambling complaints, unconfirmed references in surveillance logs, but nothing resembling a functioning hierarchy. To modern investigators, the family represented a transitional phase in California's underworld, from the ethnic syndicates of the mid-century to the diversified criminal economy of the digital age. In retrospect, the San Jose crime family's significance lies less in its size than in its longevity. For nearly 40 years, it maintained stability without the open warfare or publicity that destroyed many larger organizations. It thrived on discretion, exploiting the assumption that Silicon Valley was immune to organized crime. Its leaders, Sciortino, Cerrito, and Marino, kept their operations small, their language careful, and their connections useful. They proved that an American mafia family could exist far from the crowded boroughs of New York, operating through commerce rather than spectacle. When historians of organized crime look back on the era, the San Jose family occupies a quiet but distinct chapter, a reminder that behind California's image of innovation and progress once stood a network of men who applied old-world discipline to the New World frontier and built, for a time, one of the most understated empires in the American underworld. By the mid-1990s, the FBI's organized crime section in San Francisco had reduced active surveillance in Santa Clara County to a handful of periodic intelligence checks. Reports still noted occasional social gatherings of older Italian businessmen once listed as associates, but there was no sign of an operational command structure. When a few bookmakers were arrested in 1998 during a regional sports betting sweep, agents confirmed that none claimed allegiance to any recognized mafia hierarchy. Internally, the Bureau reclassified the San Jose group from family to legacy organization, a category reserved for networks that once operated along traditional Cosa Nostra lines, but no longer possessed functional leadership. Academic researchers reviewing declassified FBI files in later years reached similar conclusions. They found that the San Jose family never exceeded 25 made members and roughly 60 associates. Its economic base, bookmaking, labor influence, and small-scale extortion could not sustain itself once statewide law enforcement adopted electronic surveillance and racketeering statutes. The organization's low profile, which had protected it for decades, also prevented it from expanding or adapting. When its few remaining earners aged out or turned to legitimate business, the structure simply dissolved. Local police departments had already shifted priorities. The same valley that once produced canneries and produce markets had become home to semiconductor plants and technology firms. Crime evolved with it. Computer fraud, intellectual property theft, and international money laundering cases replaced gambling and loan sharking as investigative targets. When detectives from the Santa Clara County District Attorney's Office were asked in the early 2000s about mafia activity, most regarded the subject as historical. One retired investigator described the old family as the ghost that used to run the card games. Historians of American organized crime now describe the San Jose family as one of the last regional microfamilies of the Cosa Nostra era. Small, insular groups that thrived in mid-century America's smaller cities, but disappeared as federal oversight and demographic change transformed the landscape. Its record is preserved mainly in court transcripts, FBI memoranda, and a handful of newspaper archives. There were no spectacular trials, no dramatic betrayals, and no celebrated informants. Its rise and fall traced the quiet arc of California's transition from agricultural province to technological capital. For federal agents who spent careers tracking organized crime, San Jose represented an unusual case study. It demonstrated that a mafia family could exist for decades without open warfare or celebrity criminals, operating through discretion rather than intimidation. Yet it also showed the limits of that model. Without aggressive recruitment or diversification, the organization could not survive generational turnover. Unlike Chicago, New York, or even Los Angeles, there was no influx of younger members to continue the tradition. Angelo Marino's cheese empire survived under new ownership, but without any criminal associations. The factory that once symbolized the family's blending of legal and illegal enterprise became a standard food processing concern. Joseph Cerrito's Buick dealership closed long ago. The lot was later redeveloped. Onofrio Sciortino's former grocery site is now a storefront without historical markers. To the city, their names are fragments of local memory, not underworld legend. By 2010, the FBI officially closed its dedicated San Jose organized crime file. A brief notation summarized nearly 70 years of surveillance in one sentence. No current intelligence indicates the existence of a structured La Cosa Nostra element within the San Jose area. For an agency that once viewed the region as a mystery, it was a final, bureaucratic epitaph. Today, the story of the San Jose crime family survives largely through researchers, documentaries, and the occasional reference in discussions of the Appalachian Meeting. It remains a reminder that organized crime in America was never confined to the major cities, and that the machinery of the mafia could adapt, even to a valley that would one day become Silicon Valley. Its founders sought wealth and protection in a land of opportunity. Its successors learned that legitimacy could be both refuge and dissolution. In the end, the family vanished, not through gunfire or scandal, but through quiet assimilation into the very society it once exploited. What remains is history, an entry in federal archives, a footnote in the broader narrative of the American underworld, and a testament to how completely a criminal enterprise can disappear when its time has passed. The San Francisco Mafia was organized in the early 1930s by Francesco Frank Lanza. It was said to be a small organization with around 30 made members. On April 28, 1928, a gang war started in San Francisco when bootlegger Jerry Ferry, San Francisco's leading crime lord, was murdered in his apartment. His suspected murderer, Alfredo Sciortino, was an accomplished bootlegger as well, and he too was murdered on December 19th of that year. His body was found with multiple gunshot wounds and dumped in the area of Fair Oaks. On December 23rd, Mario Filippi, a suspect behind the Sciortino murder, was found shot to death. Frank Boca, another suspect in Sciortino's death, was found murdered in his car on July 30th, 1929. The next murder was that of the so-called Al Capone of the West, Gennaro Broccolo, who was found dead on October 30th, 1932. The final murder was of Luigi Malvesi. He had made a reputation as a hijacker, bootlegger, and gun-running racketeer. He was shot down on May 18, 1932, while walking through an Italian neighborhood in the middle of the day. Francesco Frank Lanza became San Francisco's first crime boss after the initial war ended in 1932. Lanza guided the crime family during the Prohibition era. He was the co-owner of San Francisco's Fisherman's Wharf and a bootlegger, pimp, loan shark, and drug dealer. The Lanza gang proved to be the strongest gang after murdering San Francisco gang leader Luigi Malvesi on May 18, 1932. Lanza derived his income from loan sharking, gun running, prostitution, gambling, and narcotics. Lanza founded the famous Fisherman's Wharf along with his partner Giuseppe Aliotto. After Lanza's death on July 14, 1937, he was succeeded by Anthony Lima. Anthony Lima took over the crime family. Lima and his underboss, Michael Abate, planned the murder of Chicago gangster Nick DeJohn. Both were arrested for the murder. The charges were dropped when District Attorney Pat Brown dismissed the jury and called a mistrial due to a lack of confidence in key witness Anita Venza. Lima lost power after he was convicted on April 27, 1953, of grand theft and sentenced to a California state prison. Michael Abate replaced Lima as boss. His underboss James "Jimmy the Hat" Lanza was one of many mafia leaders spotted by the police at the 1957 Appalachian meeting. In 1961, Michael was deported to Italy for being involved in criminal activity and died of natural causes on September 5, 1962. Francesco Lanza's son, James Lanza, became the syndicate's new head. He held the position from 1961 to 2006, during which he extended the family's connection through other syndicates. He had a close friendship with San Francisco Mayor Joseph Aliotto. This allegation has been denied by Aliotto. Lanza was well connected in Las Vegas via his friend William Bones Remmer, a Jewish associate with ties to the Genovese crime family. Lanza became wary of the serious damage that defectors could cause and took precautions against the risk of turncoats like Joseph Valachi. As a result, he brought very little new blood into the San Francisco mob as the membership aged. Lanza also made solid ties with other bosses, including Joseph Civello of Dallas and Joseph Cerrito of San Jose. His longtime underboss, Gaspare Bill Sciortino, was the cousin to the underboss of the Los Angeles crime family, Samuel Sciortino. In his book, Jimmy the Weasel, Fratianno said he reported to Lanza in 1973 when he moved to the Bay Area after his release from prison. A few years later, Lanza ended his friendship with Fratianno. Lanza complained about him being in San Francisco. In 1977, when Fratianno heard he had a hit on him, one of the charges was that he was bringing too much attention to the existence of the San Francisco crime family. Lanza was believed to have given permission for the murder of former New England crime family associate turned government witness Joseph Barboza in 1976. By 1990, there were only a few made men left in the San Francisco mob. One was Sergio Maranghi, who was involved in cocaine and heroin trafficking. Maranghi moved to the US from Florence, Italy in 1975 and eventually settled in San Francisco in 1978. He first began working as an employee of Starfish Co., a small fish processing company, which did a lot of business with Aliotto's restaurant. In 1980, Maranghi opened the Anchor Bay Cafe in North Beach. Lanza quickly noticed Maranghi's ability as a moneymaker and soon made him a member of the crime family. Maranghi was spotted many times meeting with Lanza and other San Francisco mob figures at the Anchor Bay Cafe until it closed down in 1983. He was one of many involved in a cocaine bust in October 1991. Maranghi decided to become an FBI informant instead of serving a long prison sentence and told federal agents of cocaine transactions he had had with his associates over a period of several years. Another man arrested was Gaetano Balistreri, a San Francisco mob associate who owned the Portofino Cafe on Columbus Ave. Balistreri was arrested for distributing cocaine, but the charge was eventually dropped. In 1994, the San Francisco police raided the Portofino and arrested Balistreri again, this time for running an illegal gambling operation with video poker machines. Another made member still living at the time was Steve Trefero, who ran a small gambling operation near Sacramento, California.